If you found this topic helpful, I think you will love my self-study course, The Trauma Recovery Method, Discovering Resilience, Reconnection, and Healing Through Mindfulness. I hope you choose to join me. The link is in the description below. Welcome back. Today we're going to cover the connection between the nervous system and trauma. I find the connection between the nervous system and trauma so fascinating, and we're starting to learn so many new things in psychology and in modern medicine that connect the two. To me, it makes beautiful, intuitive sense that they would be connected. So the nervous system is responsible for our fight or flight response. It's the stress response within our system. And what it does when it's in stress is it pumps cortisol or adrenaline. So we've all heard of adrenaline. Adrenaline is sort of like the short-acting version that immediately puts us into that fight or flight. So if we need to jump into action, it gives us a quick burst of energy. A perfect example of this is if you almost get in a little bit of a fender bender. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, everything starts flooding the system. And we often sort of say, we're okay. And then a few minutes later, our body might even start shaking as that adrenaline starts to rush out of the system. Cortisol, on the other hand, is also connected to the nervous system, but it's more long-lasting and tends to last around 24 to 72 hours in our system. Cortisol is responsible oftentimes when we wake up in the middle of the night feeling panicky, or if we can't sleep, because essentially it is sending systems and reactions through our system that says it's not safe enough to sleep. So that cortisol is also incredibly helpful. But when we are pumping cortisol through our system for longer periods of time, it starts to wreak havoc on the system. It leads to weight gain, inability to sleep, panic. There's a link between diabetes and endocrine systems. There's a link between autoimmune disorders and pumping of cortisol for long periods of time. So you can probably see where I'm already going with this, because when we're traumatized and when we've lived with a trauma story, which most of us have in some way, shape, or form, in those moments, we start to realize that we're putting a lot of stress on our nervous system. So trauma essentially pushes the stress response far enough that the nervous system can no longer cope. So trauma then gets essentially trapped in the body. And when we have triggers, our nervous system goes into either hypodrive or hyperdrive because of the stress response. So in that hyperdrive, we see things like anxiety, panic, inability to focus. And in the hypodrive, we see things like numbness, dissociation, and being slightly out of our bodies. And most of us have a tendency towards either getting that nervous system stuck on or stuck off. And the activation of the nervous system happens so quickly in that moment that none of us are truly in control of it. And I think this is an important point to remember, because we are not in control of our nervous systems, and our nervous systems are designed to keep us safe. So this is a good thing, unless we're in chronic trauma and stress. When we bring in strategies like mindfulness and learning how to breathe and really dissecting our trauma and understanding our trauma, what it does for us is it allows us to pause for even a split second. And in the pause, we sometimes are able to calm our nervous system down, or at least have a moment where we can think, do we need to go into fight or flight around this? Or are we actually safe in the environment that we're at? So mindfulness helps to learn to pause. And in that pause, maybe 50% of the time we can stop going into full fight or flight mode. When we can't stop going into that fight or flight mode, mindfulness still helps us after the fact to be able to calm back down, release that adrenaline from our bodies so that we're not starting to continually pump that cortisol, because it's the cortisol that starts to wreak havoc long term. So I want to take a second to kind of dissect a little bit the fight or flight response. So we know these, but I'm going to add a few more on as we go. So fight is when we get scared, when we get triggered, and our immediate response is to come at it, to make it stop. So these are responses like anxiety and anger. We come right into it. We want it to go away, and so we face it head on. The flight response is where we want to flee. So often we feel like we need to get away from the situation. Anything we can do to sort of disappear to get to safety. We're now starting to expand this even further to look at the freeze response. So the freeze response is complete numbing and dissociation. So when we've moved into freeze response, we've gone actually further than fight or flight. And the only thing that we can do to keep ourselves safe is to freeze in space, and hopefully nobody recognizes us so the danger passes by. And the other response is fawn. So this is the ability and the need and the desire to people please, to rush in, to make everyone happy, to pretend that nothing's going wrong, to kind of brush over it. And this one also is a response that we go into when we no longer feel like we can fight or flight. When we go into mindfulness and breath work and paying attention to the body, we then go into what we really truly want, which is that flow state. So the flow state comes when we are triggered, but we can be curious about the trigger. It can flow in, we might get a little bit flooded, but we can maybe even have humor about it, or we can employ our stress relieving techniques in those moments because we're enough in flow that we can stop and use the breath without going into a full stress response. This is what I love so much about breathing. And it really is as simple as a few deep breaths. So as always, I'd like to take you through a little bit of a breath exercise that's very easy in this. And this is called 4-point or box breathing. So what this will look like is breathing in for the count of 4, holding it for the count of 4, exhaling for the count of 4, and then holding it for the count of 4. So I'd like to do a few rounds. I'm going to count for you, and then I'm going to go into silence so that you can go into your own rhythm. So I'd invite you to close your eyes if you'd like. And take one nice big deep breath in to kind of reset the system and let it go. And then we're going to breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Now come into your own rhythm of that. Beautiful. So coming back into the space, just remembering that we can do this 4-point or box breathing at any point when we're starting to feel like we're moving into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response so that we can get back into flow. I thank you so much for spending your time with me. I truly appreciate it. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. If you have any requests for future topics you'd like me to cover in an upcoming video, please leave them in the comments below. Please feel free to check out the online course I have as well in the description, and we'll see you in the next video.